Hi out there in YouTube land. I'm about to get you on that roller coaster. Take you on that bumpy ride that I took in 1974. Oh yes. I've learned over time that the fallen angels and demons in the spirit realm, they need to have an invitation from us in order to enter into our lives. Well, they got that invitation from me. Didn't mean to do it. I was ignorant, but I did it. I write all about it here in my first book. This is the second edition of my first book, To Curse the Root. Well, here's what happened. Now I'm all hooked up in divination because of the practice of astrology. And I had started an astrology project. And that project, I was trying to determine if a foreknowledge of where the planets Mars, Saturn, and Uranus were at the time of an accident or some kind of sudden change, that if we could see the planets about to make their configuration, their conjunction, then perhaps we would be able to stop sudden accidents. That was my project. And so I was doing a study of people who had died sudden deaths. Some were murdered even. There were astrology charts and plotting. If I had the information, I would plot the day that they actually got attacked and look to see what degrees the planets Mars, Saturn, and Uranus were in. And so I was doing the study, but I didn't have all the information on this particular person, whose name was Frank. And so I was with some people who knew Frank. And I said to them, I said, I really need to know his exact date of birth. And they didn't really know it. And so I said, well, take me to where he is buried so I can look at the tombstone and I can see exactly what his birth date was and what his end of life date was, because I felt I absolutely had to be sure about this. So we went to the graveyard, and I didn't get all spooky or anything. I wrote down the information. We got back, and I was sitting there plotting the chart, and I said, I really wish I knew what time he was born. I'd be so much more sure then. So then one of our mutual friends, the deceased Frank's and my now friend, said, well, why don't you ask Frank? I said, what you talking about? He dead. How am I asking? Said, well, why don't we have a seance? I said, what? And I said, oh, that's ridiculous. So then my friend Henry said, come on, I know how to do it. Let's get it together. So I said, yeah, all right, let's go ahead. Let's do this. Let's see. I'll go along with you. Well, we cut out the lights by pulling the plug out of the wall while the lamps were lit. And so it was dead black in the room. We sat around the dining room table, and Henry took over as the medium. And he started going, Frank, come come to us. And so now I'm laughing. It's so funny. I'm just giggling at this. We got 6 people at the table, 3 children, 3 adults. So Henry continued to go on with this. And then all of a sudden, I looked up. In the center of the room was a giant size head. The head looks like somebody had been smoking, and a bunch of smoke had gathered in one spot, and no one had been smoking. It was just this thick white cloud. It gathered together, and it made the form of a man's head. I say that head must have been, like that. Just great big old head. And he had a V-shaped hairline. He had long sideburns, and he had a beard. And his nose was prominent. His eyes were patched over. And I'm sitting there looking. And then all of a sudden, I start screaming, "Look! Look! Look at it! Look! Look! Look at that!" But everybody's head hit the table, and some people jumped up underneath the table. And so I kept my eyes fixed on the spot, stuck the light plug back into the wall, kept my eyes on the spot. In the light, I couldn't see it. I pulled the plug out. He was still there. I did that about 3 or 4 times, and then I watched him disappear. Poof. That was the beginning. That was the invitation. From that moment on, I had fallen angels in my life, and I became a psychic medium.